Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of Coaching Kristy. I am Andrew BalugaWhale Seidman, and with me is the lovely Kristy Arnett. Say hi, Kristy.
Hey,
We are here doing 4 tables of 25 cent, 50 cent on full tilt. But before we get started, I want to catch you guys up on what's been going on of late. Deuces Crack flew me out to Las Vegas, where Christy and I had a fun week hanging out, meeting people, and most importantly, working on her poker game. We actually videotaped all of it, but due to some technical difficulties, unable to use any of the footage that we recorded. So, unfortunately, um, well, we're not going to be starting totally from scratch. As when I first took Christy as a student, she knew how much you think you said. Would you say you knew on a scale of 1 to 10, Christy?
probably a 2. And
Okay.
it was hard because, I've been playing poker for a long time. I've talked to a lot of great poker players. And right when we started, you were like, why are you doing what you're doing? And I was like, I have no idea. I have no idea. I don't know. So basically, right when we started, I was like, wow, I'm really bad at poker. So, um, yeah, I think we've done a lot of work so far, and it's unfortunate that people won't be able to see that part, but that's okay, I
Right. Well,
think.
what I'm going to say is there's some pluses and minuses to the fact that people aren't going to see like the beginning stages. I mean, the plus or the minus rather is that that's pretty interesting to watch the evolution of a poker player to go from where you really had no good reasons for what you're doing before to now where you actually have a lot of good reasons. Um, but the other thing that sort of is a positive of us losing all of that footage is that we will be able to get into some more advanced spots. We'll be able to maybe approach micro stakes from a little bit more of a skilled position than we were before. Because if we were at a 2 before, where do you say we're at now? Like maybe like a 5. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? And
yeah,
so you've been having some success since our sessions, right?
yes, definitely.
Good.
Yeah, I've
Well,
been playing just 25, 50 cent, and it's been going well.
cool. Well, before we roll the tape, I do want to go over quickly some of the things that we learned before in the previous like 7 coaching sessions that we did. Um, and so why don't we start off by saying, what is the like when I ask you why you're betting, what's the most common answer you're ever going to give me?
For value,
Yes. How come it's not as a bluff? How come that's not nearly as common?
because at the stakes I'm playing, uh, it's so much more valuable to be value betting until they raise you because players at this level aren't going to be folding a lot of hands. So
Exactly. And so we said the way we decided if we wanted to bluff someone, remember that we had to balance 2 things. You remember what those 2 things were?
pot equity and fold equity.
And you remember what sort of things like go into evaluating our fold equity? How do we know when we have good fold equity?
When we're deep, when the action would make sense that we could have a hand. Um, how many players are in the pot?
That's a big one.
Hmm.
What about those types of players? Does that matter?
Yes. Obviously, calling stations, we don't want to be trying to bluff them.
Sure. Well, I mean, yeah, but these are things that, if we're up against a bad player, our fold equity gets decreased. If we're up against multiple players, our fold equity is decreased. Another big one is board texture. One of the hands that we unfortunately aren't able to look at today, we ran a great bluff on the flop. We check raised with 2 overcards and a straight draw, and the turn card was like a terrible board texture card for us. It removed a bunch of combos of hands we could have had, and as well it strengthened our opponent's likely holding. And we need to recognize, I'm talking about the Queen Jack hand, Christine.
Right, we're
Basically,
the
we
top
called
card
Queen
pairs.
Jack out of position and we check raised a 10-9-6 board, and we got called, and the turn card was a 10. And Christy elected to make a bet, which I didn't think was a great spot to bet because board texture has a huge impact on our fold equity. Okay, good. So we know our little equation for bluffing. We know our reasons for betting. And why don't we go ahead and roll the tape? Um, and we'll start looking at and evaluating these things as they go. Okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Oh, and to quickly let you guys know what's going on, what our plan is for. Pause the tape for a second, actually. Now that I see what's going on with our pocket tens. Actually, never mind. That's not a big deal. Tell me why this 4 bets is good. I want to hear why this 4 bet to $50 is good by you here.
Okay, well, first, you can see that I played a couple of hands, like
Hmm.
5 hands before I started recording. And I saw Stooch one pretty much show that he's a bad aggressive player.
Okay.
So when he three bets me here, and he only has $30 behind, and I just feel like I'm just way ahead of most of his range because he's fish, he's bluffy, and thought it was a good time to just kind of stick it in.
Okay.
And
So
also,
yeah,
the
go
other
ahead.
thing was, in the previous trading sessions, you told me that we're not going to be calling three bets out of position because not only is that, I mean, obviously hard to play out of position, but also because if we're in a flip situation, the person in position is almost always going to win.
Not
So,
almost always, but like the impact of position takes what might be an
right,
equity spot that's 50-50
right.
and might turn it into a spot where the other guy's like 60-40 or 70-30.
Okay, yeah.
So obviously it's not like, you know, it's not like if we call out a position we lose every single time. Like
Yeah,
that's probably the
yeah.
case. But no, I mean I think that there's some great reasons for this. Number one, the stack size is really to me it would be very difficult for me to fold pocket tens given only the presence of 30 or of 60 big blinds. So that's I mean pretty tough. Just not that many hands that we lose to. But you said he's a bad aggressive player. Well,
Hmm.
I've talked in the past about bad aggressive and good aggressive, or good bad passive and bad aggressive players. Excuse me, the two main types of bad players, the two only types of bad players. Um, what is our plan? Our overall plan for a bad passive player and for a bad aggressive player?
Against a bad passive player, we're going to value bet until we get raised. These
Hmm.
passive players are never bluffing and they're only raising for value.
Yep. Yep.
And depending on our hand, obviously, even if it's a good one pair hand, we still have to fold the bad passive players. But against bad aggressive players, I mean, we still bet for value, and if we get raised, then the situation's a little differently because his raising range is much wider.
Sure, but so I want to say you emphasize there's one thing that you said, but you said it quickly and kind of glossed over, which I want to make sure we're clear on. Even against a bad aggressive player, our priority is still to value bet.
Hmm.
If we're probably not going to necessarily like the only times where we would call instead of value betting were times when we either had the absolute nuts. So if we had pocket aces here,
Hmm.
I would definitely call against this player.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because we have the absolute nuts, we're extremely unlikely to be outdrawn, and he's likely to bluff it off, etc.
Hmm.
Um, or if we had, let's say, like a hand that we didn't think we could raise for value that was too bad, but we still thought was good enough to bluff catch against somebody who bluffs his whole range. Like let's say in this case we had a hand like ace 10, right? I'm not
Hmm.
necessarily saying, I know we talked before about how we don't want to ever call out three bets out of position, but I want
Hmm.
you to start thinking outside of those strict rules that we created. Because there may be times when we would think, well, okay, my hand is either totally nuts, can't be outdrawn, or is good enough to bluff catch but can't re-raise for value. That those would actually be hands that we might look into calling with. And
Okay.
by the way, we may be inclined, depending on how bad aggressive the guy is, to call and then plan on not folding ever with ace 10. You
Okay.
know. That said, if we have a hand like pocket tens, pocket jacks, pocket queens, these are all hands that can be raised for value, aren't the absolute nuts, and so we should go ahead and make a raise. So I think you play the same pretty well. You can go ahead and run that tape. But this is one big thing that we need to be aware of against bad aggressive players is that value betting is still our top priority.
Hmm.
We threw at the ace nine in the small blind against this guy S Jors T, in the big blind against the small blind. Excuse me. Um, what was your thinking there? You can let the tape roll while we talk.
Well, I mean, I guess I could have waited to see, if he was going to be aggressive, but, we kind of talked about this too, whether we can just kind of find out early how players are going to react to three bets. So the first time he raises into me in the small blind, I said to three bet him with an ace, obviously for value because a lot of players will call out of position with worse hands.
Hmm.
So when he four bets me, it kind of tells me that he might either be a decent player or and is kind of going by the same guidelines that we are, is like, which is not calling out of position with bad hands, and either that or he just had a really good hand. So
Sure, sure. I mean, I think we talked about this before. You can go ahead and pause the tape for a second, actually, now. Um, as we said when we were talking in our sessions before, we basically said that if you get played back a lot at small stakes, and a lot of players will say this to me like, "Oh, I felt like I was getting pushed around at small stakes or whatever." What did we say was the most likely reason why that would be?
because they picked up hands.
Yeah, because they're on a huge heater, and you don't want to be the guy that gets thrown off by their huge heater and starts to pay off players who don't raise up the nuts. I think it's pretty unlikely that anybody at $50 no limit four bet bluffs with any regularity, right?
Right.
And if they do, we'll find out pretty fast. I.e., the next time if we three bet as George T again and he four bets us again, then we might have to start thinking twice. Then we might have to start maybe starting to polarize, thinking that he might be actually four betting us, a little bit more liberally. So then I might take a hand like pocket tens and three bet them with the chance of with the hope to five bet him and see, tens are so good that our equity isn't that bad when we get called, so that we might be able to feel pretty comfortable getting it in with it, to just at least figure out what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, we don't want to start spazzing out with anything that doesn't have great equity in these spots. One thing I've noticed so far in this video is that you look pretty three bet happy. I mean, we three bet the ace six off on the bottom right table. We three bet the ace nine off and took a four bet. Here we are squeezing with the ace eight. Why don't you explain to me what your plan is with all these three bets and why it's good or bad?
Well, every time that I think about three betting, obviously it's canaries for value, and a lot of times, or I can't remember the other time that you said
The bottom right table, you had ace six and you three bet against the guy Skiman or whatever, Ski Man or something. The guy sitting two seats to your right on the bottom right table.
Oh yeah.
And he called the flop was queen nine four, and he just check fold, or he folded to a c bet. But it's the same sort of general idea, which is we're basically taking ace X hands right now, and we're three betting them to death against this table. Is this a good idea? Why or why not?
I think it's a good idea because at these limits, a lot of times people are just gonna just either fold or call fold. And
How
when
does
we
that
talk,
add to our ability to get value? How do we define that?
well, when we, do you mean by creating an image or,
Well,
you know,
that's part of the long-term value of it, but what about the short-term value? I mean, clearly having them call and fold to a c bet is a great thing for us. And we call that, I don't know if you remember, we call that the collection of dead money. Basically, the fact that these guys are going to create all this passive dead money by calling and then giving up if they don't hit means that we can actually take them for, something along the lines of 10 big blinds per time we do this. So in that sense, we're good, and we're actually not even theoretically wrong in the first place, given that with a hand like ace eight or ace nine or ace six, a lot of these guys are going to call with worse hands, suited connectors, and even a hand like king jack is still a dog equity-wise to our hand, and if they fold when it misses, we're still doing just fine.
And we talked about this before because in one of the other videos, I asked you, I've three bet a ton. When should I stop? And your question or your answer is just that, when they start playing back at you, or when you come to that, when you cross that bridge, or whatever you're saying was that you read in Doyle's book, then
So
you'll deal with it.
So in Doyle Brunson's super system, he asks, he poses the question of, well, since I'm so aggressive, when should I start worrying about getting check raised? Because he says always betting out the flop. He's people are always checking him. He's always betting. So aren't you worried you're going to get check raised? And his response is, I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. Which essentially means I'm not going to try to fix something that isn't broken yet.
Right.
And so in this case, we're not going to try to fix something that ain't broke. We're going to keep on doing what's making us money, what's working out easily and comfortably for us. And then when someone starts to give us more trouble by floating our c-bets or by raising them or by four-betting us or whatever, then we might adjust our game plan a little bit. But until then, we're going to keep on hammering. So I like it so far. Why don't you go ahead and hit play?
So with this ace eight, obviously against this stooge guy, not only is it, only $21 more, but I just was like, I just have the best hand so many times because of how crazy he was playing. And you kind of, you kind of told me, another concept is that when you have fish at your table, they have a timer over their head because they're going to lose their money. It's just to who and when. So
yeah, this is actually a concept that I've never said in a video before, so I think I'm going to reiterate it for the crowd. Whenever you have a bad player at your table, imagine a timer over their head. Everyone is trying to take that person's money, and like every hand that goes by that you're not playing with a fish or that you're not taking a chance to take the fish's money, that timer ticks down one step further to somebody else taking that fish's money. And so in this sense, we actually feel okay about gambling a little bit with the fish, given that if he doubles up or something like that, if we lose a pot to him, he's likely to hang around, and we'll still have like a chance to win that money back later. But if we are able to take take his money now, even if it's like sort of a kind of a thin gamble, then that's doesn't let everyone else at the table take it, which is really really good. Because that's what everyone at the table is mostly playing for. It's where the bulk of our profits are coming from. But I want to make one other comment about the ace-8 hand there. We're getting about 2-1
Mm-hmm.
on a call. And in general, if you have any kind of hand that has decent equity whatsoever, whether it's a couple high cards, maybe it's just an ace, maybe it might even be like a suited connector. If you're getting 2-1, and you think there's any chance the guy's range has any width whatsoever to it, you can't really fold getting 2-1.
Okay.
2-1 is like what I consider to be like a semi-magic number, provided that you have a hand with some kind of equity. And so getting 2-1 there, we can basically say, well, like, let's gamble. The fact that we know the guy is bad aggressive is just a great bonus to that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of those things where we generally won't find a lot of folds getting such good odds.
Mm-hmm.
The other beautiful thing that we see on this table on the top right is that player, this bad aggressive player, is rebought in, which is awesome. All right, so this is a really good, interesting spot. I'm excited to see what you do here because your turn bet was big, was perfect, get maximum value. Clearly, we have to go for value here on the river, which I think you're going to do, which is good. Let's see how big you decide to make it, and then you can explain. You can explain yourself. Okay, so you make it mondo huge. Okay, why don't you pause the tape for a second?
Okay.
Yeah,
that was one of those spots where I wasn't sure how thin that would be. So, obviously before you told me if the thinner it is, the smaller you can make it.
Right.
Make your value bet. I wasn't okay when he snap called on the turn.
Right.
I felt like it was a flush draw, or someone getting summoned with a 10.
Sure.
And I thought that if he had Queen Jack, he would bet into me.
What's one big reason why he's unlikely to have Queen Jack? How about the fact that you have all the jacks?
Well, yeah, that's true.
Okay, so there's not that many Queen Jacks left.
Okay.
But what I want to say is that like there's two things going on. I don't think we're very likely to be beat.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to remember that I want you to define value for us again. Like, what does it mean to get value?
To get a worse hand to call you? Sure.
And so even if we are for sure, if we know the other guy has a worse hand than us, that guy has a worse hand than us almost all the time there,
Mm-hmm.
What matters is not that he has one. What matters is that he's going to call with one. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And so this is why like thin, when we're betting for thin value, we make it small because we have to keep all of like those worse hands in. This is something that I call pseudo thin value. It's basically like thin value except we know we win.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so in this case, we're basically going to try to bet the most that we think that he'll call with the weakest elements of his range. Now it may be well that he had a flush draw and he'd never call anything, but it's one of those things where we might see a higher expectation on that kind of river card without any real image by betting like half pot.
Right.
Now, let's say we've been crazy and we've been bluffing and 3-betting and all kinds of stuff. Then I think that a pot is much more appropriate. Because I think that he will look us up with a hand like Queen 10.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But I'm not positive he looks us up with Queen 10 there, given the image that we've developed in such a short amount of time in this session.
Mm-hmm.
You see how that makes sense?
Yes, definitely.
So this is like this is one of the things that's cool about us having gone through all this stuff already, is that we can now start to see how image, which is one of the more advanced concepts, affects how big we might make it on the river there. We're really loose and crazy and bluffy and all this stuff. And as a matter of fact, the fact that we showed down the ace-8 off, is maybe a good reason that we should make it a little bit bigger. But even so, I still think that we might see a higher expectation making a little bit of a smaller bet. Now, before we play the tape again, I want to talk about this hand on the bottom left.
Mm-hmm.
So we raised 7-8 suited, and got a call, and the flop was 10-10-5, and we c-bet it, and he called. Give me a range for his call on the flop there.
I think that he could have just a pocket pair, because that's the kind of board that you kind of are expecting that your pocket pair is still good on. I think that's his most likely holding. I mean,
That's part of it.
he's
So we just before we get into likeliness, let's talk about everything.
okay.
So he
Okay.
could have a pair.
He could have a flush draw. He could have a float.
Hmm.
Um,
He could probably have a monster too, like a 10 or pocket fives.
mhm.
Um, but I mean, let's look now like in terms of likelihood of like amount of things in his range, combos and stuff. There's a fair amount of combos of pairs, a fair amount of combos of draws. There's not that many combos of monsters.
Right.
Um, and uh, and there's a lot like a fair amount of combos of floats. Um, and almost all those floats and flush draws and stuff still have like a lot of equity against us.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Two overcards is still doing pretty well with us, especially if maybe those two overcards picked up a straight draw of some kind, like if you had like Jack 9 or something like that. Um, okay, so putting all this together, what do you think the best line is on the turn there after he calls our flop bet?
To check.
Why is that?
Because I don't.
Go through the
I don't
process. Go
think.
through the process we've gone through a million
Right.
times.
Right.
Can
Can
you
I
bet
bet
for
for
value?
value? Um, I don't think that he's going to call with a worse hand than a pair of sevens.
Okay.
And I have no real, redraw or anything besides a 7 or an 8, or
Sure.
obviously.
Sure.
So
Clearly we're hurting on redraws.
yeah.
That's true. If we get called, an 8 might not even be very good. But I want to emphasize that getting someone to fold their equity share is a part of value.
Okay.
That sort of complementary reason that we've talked about before, this idea of collection of dead money and getting someone to fold their equity share.
Mm-hmm.
Betting here and getting him to fold a hand that may play close to perfectly on the river if we check is actually pretty good for us. Like let's take a hand like, for example, if he has ace jack here, right?
Mm-hmm.
We bet, we get him to fold ace jack. You might offhand say, well, we want him to bet ace jack if we check, right? Because we can check call. But the real problem with that is he's obviously making a mistake on the turn, but he's very likely to play very, very well on the river, i.e., let's say the river peels off a jack and he bets,
Mm-hmm.
that's, a spot where we're going to pay off a ton. But if the river peels off a queen, he may check, which is, once again, him playing perfectly. Right? And we don't want his turn to play perfectly. So I would actually say it's very, very close here between a check call and a bet. But I probably like a bet for thin value. I might make it like 5 here.
Okay.
Hoping to get him to fold out a lot of hands that have equity, as well as hoping him to potentially call me with worse hands or flush draws and stuff like that. The other beautiful thing about this is we talked about a line in a previous video that didn't air, obviously, about this line called keeping their heads down. Remember that?
Yeah.
And do you remember what that line's idea was? If not, it's cool. It's kind of an obscure spot, but it's happening right now.
I can't remember exactly.
Okay,
But
I'll go over it again because it's one of those spots that like it's a very specific line that I like a lot, but it only comes up in spots like this. The way it comes up is your opponent either has, most likely either has like a showdown value hand that's probably slightly worse than yours, right? So basically you could either bet for very, very thin value, or he has a drawing hand of some kind, right?
Mm-hmm.
The purpose of this line is we bet the turn for thin value, and then if the draw bricks out, we check call, and we get a ton of value on this check call because he's going to check back all the hands that he would have called with. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, all the hands that he would have called with that had showdown value. So let's say we bet here and he calls with pocket 6s, or he calls with pocket 9s, right?
Mm-hmm.
No matter what he has, if we check the river, he's going to check back with those hands.
Right.
However, let's say he calls us with king jack of clubs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the river card is a 3 offsuit, and we check. Well, he's going to go bombs away there. You know what I mean? And we make a ton of money by betting this turn for thin value and check calling the river on blanks.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you see how that makes sense?
Yeah. Definitely.
And the reason why it's weird is because it's like part of it is the fact that we're betting for such thin value, but we're getting quite a bit of value from his drawing hands that miss on the river when we check.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be my preferred line here. But once again, kind of an obscure spot, a little difficult to feel out. But it's basically every time you're thinking to yourself, it would be really, really thin value, but there's a lot of draws on the board. That's when you want to take this line.
Okay.
Why don't you go ahead and press play?
And
And we
unfortunately,
check, and he bets, and now we're going to be really, really confused the rest of the hand.
exactly. So unfortunately, I didn't do that. I just check folded.
I actually don't hate that you check fold here because it leads me to a spot. Leads me to a certain way of thinking that I think is good. But what do I always say about bluff catching against players at this limits?
It's not good because they're rarely bluffing.
Exactly. Don't bluff catch against people who don't like to bluff. Now on that board, it's actually relatively likely that he's bluffing because there's just so few copies of tens.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and everyone who's looking and say, oh, he's a 14-10 over 200 hands. Um, I still am not convinced that 200 hands is anywhere near significant enough to really know what that guy plays like.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, but, even then, you might be able to take his stats and say, well, it's at least an indicator that we should check fold the turn. I still think his most likely hand by far is draw.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we take the line that I suggested by betting small on the turn, it's really easy for us to fold to a raise. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like if we bet small, first of all, he's going to want to raise with his pocket tens or with his 10, because um, he will want more value than that. You know what I mean? He won't be really happy with getting in half pot on the turn with 3 tens on a draw heavy board.
Mm-hmm.
And so he'll probably raise with a 10, which means that we're perfectly fine just folding. And most players still won't raise with a draw there. So we pretty much know exactly what he has when he calls us.
Okay.
So that might be a spot we could think about double barreling.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Just because we do pick up some pot equity. We got probably 7 good outs. But I think that once again we do ourselves a disservice to overestimate our fold equity. Trying to what I always say about people trying to fold a hand.
They don't like to do it.
Nobody likes to fold a hand ever, and that extends all limits all the time. Nobody enjoys that feeling of being like, oh, I've got top pair, like I better lay it down. Like that's not how people think.
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone who's playing small stakes and being like, oh, I need to move up where they respect my raises. No way. It's not that they respect your raises up there. It's just that people are bluffing more. So what you're doing is you're getting people to fold air. So oftentimes when we're bluffing, we're trying to get someone to fold the weakest end of their range and whatever air hands they might have that have equity against us.
Mm-hmm.
And so we, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, we need to make sure we're not trying to, we're not putting guy on a hand and trying to get him to fold that hand.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like we're trying to say, oh, he probably has king jack there or ace 10. I doubt we get that guy to fold ace 10 on the turn. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. The biggest thing, and when I talk to my friends who say they've tried to play cash games online and haven't had success,
Mm-hmm.
the biggest thing that seems so easy and such like common sense is to always be asking yourself, can I raise through value? And if not, then don't. But and then always when you can't raise value, or if you're trying to bluff, is to ask those questions too. Like, do I have pot equity? Do I have full equity? And it sounds so easy, but it was a really hard step to get over, and to always make yourself. And it's still, I'm still trying to get used to it and to make sure that I'm going through all these processes. But it's easy to just keep playing and keep doing the things that you think you're supposed to be doing without actually analyzing and getting down to the nitty-gritty of why you're doing what you're doing.
Well, so one thing we talked about when we were working before, and here's an interesting spot. Okay, we'll talk about this in a second.
Okay.
But I'm going to watch you play this queen jack hand. So we see bet there. That's a spot where our basic game plan of 3-bet c-bet tells us we want to c-bet.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of those hands where we need to be careful. We need to count up, what hands is this guy actually folding on a board like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually it's one of those spots where that type of board takes us closer and closer and closer to check folding.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Not to say that hand is a check fold, because I would still probably see bet at this point in the session and see what happens. Especially because we probably do have 6 good outs. But we need to sort of remember that we're not just getting someone to fold, a lot of people think about poker in terms of ranges, and that's good. But they also need to remember that ranges are made up of individual hands. And oftentimes they forget that, like, how many of those hands match up with the board. You know what I mean? Like, if that guy's not folding ace 10 on that flop, on the 8-7-4 flop, which he may not, we can't c-bet that board.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Just because
Right.
there's so many hands that are not folding that are good. I mean, now he may fold like king high and queen high and stuff like that, but even jack 10's got a gut shot there that's not going anywhere.
Right.
And so in that sense, we just need to be careful. I think it's still probably a good c-bet. One thing we talked about in the previous sessions was how often someone actually has to play back at your c-bets to make them bad. And it's a lot. You remember that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we could still see that really aggressively, but the reason why I was like a little hesitant too was just like the previous hand we had c-bet against that guy in the 3-bet pot, and he had called a bet against us, and then bet half pot on the turn. So it was like one of those spots where it was like maybe we should be careful, but I think it's probably fine. Anyway, what I want to talk about before is you were saying, well, it's really hard to adjust, especially as a live player coming to the online world. How do I get in the habit of doing these things? And actually, it dawned on me when we were talking about this stuff that poker, getting someone to change the way they think about poker is very much like changing someone to or helping someone through withdrawal from an addiction. Essentially, we're addicted to thoughts that we're comfortable with, thoughts that make us feel like more easy, more comfortable, like we know what we're doing, we have a plan, even if those thoughts don't make any sense at all. And this is actually one of the reasons why when people tilt, they play way worse, is because when people are frustrated or emotional, they want something that makes them feel more comfortable. And what those things are the bad thoughts that we've been taught our whole life. The things like, oh, I'm betting here because I have the best hand, or I'm betting here because I want him to fold.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly.
Insufficient explanations that everybody begins with in poker. Nobody sits down at poker for the first time and is like, oh, I'm betting a polarized range here because I expect him to, like, people sit down at poker the first time and they're like, ooh, an ace and a jack. That's pretty good. Let's put in a raise. Ooh, he re-raised me. Well, I'm going all in because these are pretty, oh, he's got pocket kings. You know what I mean? It's like, it's part of an evolution that we have. Ooh, this is kind of interesting. It's part of an evolution that we have to get rid of these addictive thoughts and to recognize when we're sinking back into our addiction via tilt. Sinking back into this idea of, I want to do what, is easy and screw it. Screw the process.
Right.
The process is the only thing that matters. It's all that's important in this game. The only reason I said that the ace-queen was interesting there is because this dude is nuts and quite possibly his high is good. And if it's not, we still probably have okay equity. But he's a little too deep for us to be comfy.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Because he went in for 43 in the pouch 3 hours. So I just figured, I mean, I know he's got a clock on his head. I just thought that I could figure something.
Yeah, that gamble might be a little too bad for us. But at the very least, we should pause. I like how you paused and thought about it for a second. Oh yeah, well, the other thing too is to recognize how equity works. If you're making a thin gamble, remember that equity plays a part into it. It's not like if that guy's got jack 10 for top pair that we suddenly lose. We still are like, okay, that's part of the gamble. That said, I still think that's a fold. We're getting 2-bet odds. But if he was sitting like way more shallow, then I would be way down to call.
Right.
If we could just get a little bit better odds on our money. Good. This session is pleasing to me right now because
Actually,
you're doing pretty well.
Yeah. Another question though is on the top left a few hands ago.
You can pause and go back to it if you want.
Okay. Somniac raised, and it was this one. He raised, and I thought about re-raising.
Oh, re-raising pre-flop? I would have re-raised pre-flop.
Okay, but
why would you raise pre-flop?
One of the concepts that you told me was, if we can bring a fish along, and this guy who's a half stack and
Rosalito.
Yeah, I saw him play a little bit bad, so I was thinking maybe I should just call here, playing
So this is okay. This is really interesting and good. We have to balance two things here, which is can I get value now? And if the answer is yes, then you almost always want to just take it.
Okay.
That said, if there's another way you could say, can I get better value later?
Mm-hmm.
It's only if that reason is really compelling that
Okay.
you would want to not get the value now. And this is one of those interesting spots where it's like really, really close. You know what I mean? We can get pretty clean value by 3-betting ace-10 there, most likely.
Okay.
But so here's a question. Let's say instead of having ace-10, we had like jack-10. You know?
Okay.
In that case, we might say, ooh, I could get value, but it'd be pretty thin from Somniac.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Or I could call and try to get value from Rosalito. And most likely, that, or almost certainly, the value in that case is just way, 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 way better.
Okay.
And by the way, watch and see if Rosalito doesn't fold here because he flops to the straight. But interesting to watch. You know what I mean? In the event that Rosalito say raise folds there on the flop,
Mm-hmm.
what does that tell us about his character?
That he's a bad aggro.
Exactly, because a bad passive player ain't never, ever, 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 raise folding that.
Sorry, my dog is barking.
Those of you at home don't realize this, but Kristy has the most beautiful dog of all time.
Hey.
Her name is Dallas, and she just wants to be loved, and I want to love her.
She's like a 35-pound dog who thinks she's a guard dog, so she's barking out. She thought someone was at the door, but and then this hand I raised with King 5 suited because you told me my kind of guidelines for being able to raise in position, and suited cards are good,
Mm-hmm.
big cards are good, and this is probably, I knew you would say this is probably borderline, or I thought you would say that, but because
Why would I say that's borderline?
I don't know, because I'm on the cutoff and not like on the button or anything.
Yeah, but like you're in the cutoff. Cutoff's pretty good. Plus, there's a fish. There's a guy
Yeah,
limping. He's got a timer over his head, and you've got two cards that are higher than 4.
Okay.
No, that's a little bit of exaggeration, but like in general, like you have one big card and they're suited, and like you're in late position against a fish limping early position. Like maximize that. I wouldn't honestly probably hate it if you raised Queen X suited there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that you play that fine.
I thought maybe my
No
bet
monsters
sizing on
under
the
the bed there. No monsters under the bed. That's a C bet for sure.
Okay. All right.
Because once we check there, we're pretty much done. Like there's going to be pretty much no way that we're going to be able to win the pot at any point.
Mm-hmm.
But there's not very many combos of aces left because there's only 2 aces left in the deck. And like we can actually, I mean that part we could even call that like honestly a pure bluff. We can get pocket pairs, and we're actually losing to. We can get those to fold. So.
Mm-hmm.
So we just on the bottom right here we just called that donk with 10-7 suited and then we just checked it down.
Oh, sorry, I was staring at the top right of the screen.
Yeah. I think that we just called that donk on the flop. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. I think so. You want me to rewind it?
No, I think it's fine. We can just talk about it.
Okay.
What I was going to say was calling the donk on the flop is fine, but I think once he checks the turn on the ace, we could probably bet that.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it wouldn't need to be a big bet. I just think that we can get him to fold out a variety of hands that might even have us beat. Like if you had like a hand like say, 9-7 for like bottom pair, or what he had pocket eights, or I think there's a number of hands that we could get to fold out. Just we will only have to bet very very small too. You know what I mean? I would bet no more than half pot ever on the turn. Probably closer to like 1/3 pot. Just because, once again, one thing we asked ourselves a lot was, what am I buying with this extra money? And one of the reasons why people often bet or raise too much when they're bluffing is because they don't realize they're trying to just fold out air. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to fold out something that they could bet any amount and that hand would fold. But yet they try to bet extra to look really scary. And we don't need to worry about looking scary. Okay, so talk about this double barrel up here on the top left.
I thought that he was calling a lot of flops, and I just thought that, not only a lot of times do I have the best hand because he's just a bad player, but that I thought that the jack was a good card to bet on the turn. Because I feel like it could hit a lot of my range.
Sure. But remember, he doesn't care about your range.
That's true. That's true.
But he does probably care about the board texture.
Mm-hmm.
He probably does see that, like, if he had pocket deuces there, ooh, that jack is high. Scary. And so I think it's actually a good spot. All right, so we flop top pair in a 3-bet pot on a draw-heavy board against a guy sitting with half a stack. This should play itself. I'll be shocked if you find a fold here somewhere. If he goes all in here, I'm calling so fast that my finger will hurt. And if I lose, then I lose. I can't imagine you fold here. Please tell me don't fold here.
I can't remember.
Looks like you're going for the max. Looks like you're going for the max. Yes. Okay, good.
I'm so happy I did the right thing because I don't remember.
Yeah, I mean, we end up, obviously it's not great for us once passive guy raises the flop. That's not our ideal situation, but with only half a stack left to play and top pair on a draw heavy board, you know, normally we're going to be in a lot better shape than against this set.
Right.
So we flat with the 9-7 suited in position. What's your thought process?
Because the 12-12 kings limping in early position. And obviously I can't re-raise for value, so I just called.
And we are in position, which increases the value of our hand. And but let me ask you this question in general. Let's say for some reason that the fish folds.
Right.
And it's just us two. What are we trying to do against this Paul Rizzo guy? Most likely.
Just lay in position and try and...
Put it this way. Are we going to be trying to bluff this guy using our position, make moves, or are we going to try to value bet him by making a 2-pair hand or better?
Oh, I don't know.
In general, against... If we're going to think that most everybody here is either bad passive or bad aggressive, our plan against all bad players is not to bluff.
Okay.
Remember? So a lot of players get themselves really carried away there where they flop, you know, I flop a gut shot and a flush draw, so I'm going to raise and get it in. You know what I'm saying? And that's a mistake. Ooh, nice turn card. To quickly emphasize, though, why are we raising that flop?
Because I forgot to ask myself.
Why don't we pause the tape? Why don't we pause the tape for a second?
Okay. I remember being like, right after I raised, I was like, ooh.
No, I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's bad.
Well,
think about it. We have a note on this guy. What's our note say on this guy? You made it like 2 hands ago.
That he, I can't remember exactly what I wrote.
You wrote that he donks weak.
Oh, yeah.
Okay?
Oh, yeah.
Just donked with pocket 8s like under pair and gut shot, right? And then, so what that tells us here is that we're raising, like, if he has a queen, oh no. But in general, we think he's got an 8 or a 6 or something random. Which means that we're raising for value. Yeah. And we just get lucky because we get bailed out on the turn.
Yeah, after he calls. And the other thing was that you told me, it's not bad to find out early, especially when they're, even though I already knew and saw him lead week 4, but when he's betting small, to just try it out, you know? It's not like...
Yeah, put in a small raise and see what the response is. It costs you very little at the beginning of a session, and it will allow you to play almost perfectly throughout the rest of the session. Honestly, the fact that I shouldn't have phrased it that we get bailed out when we spike a 9, because, like, we raise the flop expecting to be good when we get called most of the time. You know what I mean? I think the 9's a brilliant card for us because a lot of his hands here are like 8-7. You know what I mean? Which now we're going to pay off all kinds of bets for fun. So, I mean, I think we pretty clearly go ahead and bet for value there. Hooray. And now we're like, now our choice is super easy. You know? There is no choice. It's to go all in. And be like, King Queen, one time. Not the Jack 10. That would suck if he had it. Oh, but he doesn't. But you see what I mean? Like, even, like, one of the great things about this is we're going to play pretty much perfectly the whole rest of the hand. He donks. with king queen. So now that's telling us, by the way, that this guy's just donking all kinds of whatever he has.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which we might want to abridge our leads weak note,
Right.
or update that. But the other thing that's important is this: we put in a small raise on the flop, but you weren't probably putting in any more money on the turn or river. It would have been too thin.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're not putting any more money on the turn or river, we're playing perfectly unless we spike, in which case we we get his stack as shown, as demonstrated. So in that sense, like the small raise gets us a lot of advantages too, just basically buying us 2 more streets to play perfectly on,
Mm-hmm.
which we do. Good job us. It's easy when you spike a set, but people don't realize that like there's a great benefit to being able to do that even if we don't spike a set. Like if the turn card comes a 10, we can just not put any more money in and go about our life.
Definitely.
Okay, so you're thinking about betting on this bottom left table right now. That's kind of interesting to me. Why are you doing that?
Well,
And why are you doing it
okay.
so damn big? This seems bad.
Yeah. So I
Why don't you pause
see
the tape
that.
and let's talk about this because it seems this is important.
Okay.
And you didn't see bet with the 7-8. All kinds of shit's going on right now.
Okay. So on the bottom left against
Yep.
Paul
Let's start
Bristol.
with the bottom left. He
He's
donks the flop.
right. He's playing on another one of my tables.
He's playing on multi-tables. Okay, so now we think that he might be some kind of a regular.
Yes. And he 3-bet me pre-flop, and I call in position.
Oh, he three bet pre. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so when that flop came, he led 6 into me. I think that well, first of all, I think he's more likely to be able to 3-bet with hands with a wider range just because he's playing a couple tables and
Sure.
So I called there, and then when and kind of the regular obviously line is when you 3-bet you c-bet. So
Sure. No, I think the call's fine. The call's totally okay.
Okay.
I'm not worried about that part at all. What I'm worried about is the turn card brings a diamond, giving
Uh-huh.
a second pair in the nut flush draw, and for some reason we are inclined to go all in. Or to at least bet the pot, which would have committed us to going all in.
Yeah, that was bad.
That's a big question. Why are we betting there? Why are we betting?
I thought that if I bet there, I could get a weak ace to fold. I know I'm not supposed to do that.
In dreams.
Okay.
That guy's like, oh no, I should fold my ace 5 now. You know what he's thinking? He's thinking, okay, I've got top pair in a 3-bet pot, so here we go.
Yeah.
But I want to think about this one more time though, which is that we want to check back. We want to get the showdown in spots where it's extremely unlikely for us to get outdrawn.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Once we have once you have the nut flush draw on the turn there, we just cut down on the other guy's equity a lot.
Okay.
It's very difficult for him to get outdrawn. But then if you think about this, the ability for us to check back and spike, if we spike a flush, not only will he pay off with any diamond that he has, i.e. he'll check, we'll bet, and he'll probably call with any diamond. He's likely to bluff with many cards that don't have diamonds as well.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we have great implied odds on a diamond there. We are really unlikely to lose if we're already ahead. If we're behind, we want to see a free card anyway. And most importantly, we can't get value or really bluff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of those spots where I think we have to check. And we're excited to check. We feel great about checking.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
Okay. Now, top left table. This is turning into a disaster up there, probably because we were flustered by the hand that was going on or whatever. But we raised 7-8 suited under the gun.
Oh, top right?
Or top right table, yeah. It's not put under the gun. He probably limps. I think he... Oh, wait, I think I might have the action on this wrong. Why don't you rewind this a little bit? He must raise in the small blind, and we call in the big blind.
No. I raised under the gun.
Okay, you raised under the gun. That's fine. We're 200 big blinds deep with a fish. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
You know what I mean? But what in God's name would inspire us to not see bet a 10-10-3 flop when we have 8 high?
I don't know.
Seems like he folds a lot there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then when the turn card comes a king, which like bails us out because now he can represent ace king that check back and now we can bet again or whatever, we pass on that one too. So far, it looks like we're trying to get the showdown with our 8 high and see what's going on. And I think this is not a win. This is not a win right now. So why don't we
Okay.
play the tape and see what exactly is going on here? Maybe you spike an 8 or something. Oh, and now we're gonna bet it. Actually, no, that's fine. I'm okay with you betting. You have to bet like any street. Like he's asking you to take it away from him since the flop, since
Yeah.
before the flop. He's been like, please just raise and then c bet and I'll fold. And we've talked about it so many times, and it's just shocking to see it not go down with 8 high on a 10-10-3 board.
I
Oh
don't know.
well, we learn. Um, okay, so we 3-bet the queens and we bet for value here. Here's an
Mhm.
interesting spot. What if this guy raises us here?
Um, well, the Beluga theorem, right? We only have, well, actually, if we use the kings as a pair, we have two pair. But that when passive players raise, one pair isn't isn't a good hand. Um,
How about let's just go
but
with this.
that's
If that guy raises you, most likely he's raising for value.
right.
If he's
But
raising for value, what does he have?
well, that's the thing, and I still kind of have trouble with is that when you're playing against bad players,
Hmm.
sometimes they don't have the same um, they don't have the same view of what is good for value. So what if, I
What if
mean,
he thought, yeah, exactly. I know, I understand what you're saying. What if he thought that like his pocket eights there was the best hand and he was raising for what he
yeah,
thought was like trying to get into fold the ace queen or whatever. You know what I mean? Or
yeah,
like,
but
I'm
that's,
trying to get into, just raising just cuz, like doesn't understand. Those types of players exactly define bad aggressive.
hmm
You know what I mean? Anytime you see somebody being like, "Ooh, I'm raising with my second pair here cuz I want to, for whatever reason, I'm sure he doesn't have one." That's bad aggressive. That's what that means. So basically, if you see a bad passive player, it's because you don't expect them to do that with pocket tens.
hmm
You know what I mean?
hmm
If we had some more image or some more history, or we knew that this guy was bad aggressive, then we would definitely not fold our queens there.
okay.
You know what I mean? But I'm
But
saying is
until
that,
then, I kind of have to just go with
yeah,
go with that.
you probably have to just go with a basic assumption of if that guy check raises a king X flop in a 3-bet pot, he probably has a king.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
hmm
And now this is one of those spots where when we were recording our first video series that got nilled, um, we had a hand where we made a pretty big fold with an overpair with pocket jacks against a turn check raise against a guy
hmm
we'd never seen before that we assumed was bad passive, and it turned out like 4 hands later that he was actually bad aggressive, and we shouldn't have folded.
hmm
Right?
Yeah.
Tough. That's the problem we get by playing with players we don't know. We
hmm
don't know what they're capable of, and there's no one has yet to solve this. Like how to know exactly how somebody plays before you've ever played with them before. And so we have to go with some assumptions. We have to guess at the beginning. And
hmm
usually you're best off guessing passive and bad. So I'm assuming you're going to muck these pocket sevens.
No, I didn't.
See, this
I
is
wasn't.
the real problem. Tell me why you think this is a real problem.
Um, because I could get squeezed,
Sure, you're not
or
closing the action. Number one,
yeah.
really significant.
Okay.
Number two, you're not guaranteed this guy's coming along who min raised.
Mhm.
It's likely, but as you see what happens, he didn't,
Mhm.
right? If
Yeah.
we were much more confident that this guy was coming along, then it doesn't turn out to be that bad. But given that like we don't know we're gonna go multi-way, oh, and then we go ahead and bet here, this thing is gonna turn into a um, if he had air, he most likely would bet on an ace king 4 flop.
Yeah, you're right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so when he checks, he's either got a monster going for the check raise, he's got total air that he for some reason didn't bet, or he's got a hand like pocket queens, which he's just trying to check call with.
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
We got really
Yeah,
lucky that our hand worked out that time, but that's just
definitely.
a fold pre-flop.
Mhm. Okay.
Ooh, we have a double gutter up top and a big pot. Kind of exciting. It's like one of my favorite scenarios, I would say. 10-8 on a
Yep.
queen 9-6 rainbow flop. We're just really hoping for the 7 because we don't want to get absolutely owned by king 10,
Yeah.
which has been known to happen.
But in a spot like this, I really wasn't sure what I was supposed to do because I had a player behind me, and when I have a hand like a double gutter and kind of a draw, so I know we talked about this before, but I couldn't remember exactly, when I should be betting or check calling because I don't want to bet in this multi-way pot,
Yeah. No, you play it
and get
fine. You have no fold equity on the flop.
okay.
The odds of getting 3 players, including at least one bad one, probably 2 bad ones, to fold on a queen 9-6 flop is minimal.
Okay.
It's not like your implied odds significantly increased because against bad players, you can make it however much you damn please if you hit.
hmm
If that turn card's a 7 and this guy leads out for 350, you could make it 20. He's still not going to fold 2 pair.
hmm
You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
And so in that sense, like, it doesn't really hurt your implied odds not to bet. You don't have the formula. You don't have enough fold equity to make a bet. So you check and you see what happens. You know, a lot of players get too tied to the fact that they're the pre-flop raiser. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Once you see the flop, it's just everyone's at the flop. You know,
hmm
that's all there is to it. You made it to the flop. Hooray. It's like, it's not like you are somehow like you have this obligation to bet every time you raise pre-flop. We just do it because most of the time it's right because we have the proper fold equity.
hmm
But when we don't, we don't. On this left table, we might have enough fold equity to bet there. I might bet the ace-9 there. You know what I mean? It looks like you're going to. That's fine. The board texture is super dry. We still have like potentially some decent equity, and it's only 2 players as opposed to 3. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm much cooler c-betting that flop than I would be up there with the other one. Just because I think that the presence of another player there and a wetter or a more wet board is kind of rough for us. Not to mention that we could potentially bluff this guy on a lot of turn cards. Let's say the turn card comes like a king or a queen. We could fire both of those cards.
hmm
You know what I mean? Not to mention an ace is a good card. So in that sense, we're drawing pretty live to profitable situations on the turn.
Yeah, I didn't think that was a good turn not to bet.
The 6, I agree, pretty bad. Especially when you consider that a lot of his range might be like mid-pair stuffs.
hmm
He's pretty, a lot of those now pick up straight draws, like pocket 5s, pocket 7s.
Yeah.
And he's probably not folding 8s or better, so. Yeah,
Right.
I think that hand is to play totally okay. One of the big advantages we have is, so long as people keep on letting us see cards, we'll keep on playing well.
hmm
You know? And
Yeah.
so it's like, I'm trying to think of what hand we played earlier today that was just like that, where, it was the pocket 9s hand, where the guy donked and we raised, We spike a 9 on the turn, we stack, and we play perfectly. You know what I mean?
hmm
If we don't spike a 9 on the turn, we never put any more money in the pot, and we get the showdown.
Right.
You know?
hmm
And that's simply that. Okie doke. This is pretty much going to do it for our first episode of Coaching Kristy.
Can I say one thing really
You
quick,
can
though?
say more than one thing if you want.
Okay. Well, we were talking about this, and before another hand came up, but the biggest, most helpful thing that I changed about my game was to bet until I got raised and to be able to, separate between relative hand value and actual hand value. And it's something that I've heard before all the time, especially from like great players, but it's until you put it into practice, it's harder to do than just saying it, So, a little while after you left, I was trying to, get back in keep continuing the good habits.
Mhm.
And I had an overpair on like 5, 6, 8 flop or something, and it was a 3-bet pot, and I bet, and I got raised, and I could hear your voice telling me, I was like, this is a fold, you have to, he's passive, but I was like, no, I have jacks, and then I got bit in the butt, when he doubled up with the set, and so hopefully I know there's a ton of obviously advanced players on Just Crack watching these videos, but for the beginners who are trying to start this journey with me and are also beginning players and trying to learn micro stakes and low stakes online, is that's what really, really helps me the most. So even though you know the stuff, you have to trust it and just do it, you know?
Well, I think that the most important thing that we put together wasn't even the actual knowledge itself, but it's the process that we go through to take all the information and turn it into decisions.
Mhm.
You know? I mean, you've heard me say the phrase "go through the process" about like a million times. Because when you get raised, there's a process you go through. You say, is this person passive or aggressive? If passive, he's value betting. If he's value betting, his hands are the following hands. If it's those hands, I have to fold or have to call or whatever,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
If he's, is he aggressive? Well, now he could be value betting and bluffing, and all of a sudden now we have to, make some more difficult decisions. But luckily for us, we don't have to make that many difficult decisions at micro stakes
Right.
because the great blessing of this is that because everyone is passive or most people are passive until shown otherwise, our choices are generally pretty easy. And if you actually look back at like one of the original coaching tree videos, or maybe even one of my ghost videos, I don't remember which video it is, but I actually say, uh, I could just start this video and say, keep betting for value and fold if they raise, and then record nothing more. And if you just put a sticky on that, like put a sticky note on your computer that said that, you could probably beat small stakes.
Right.
Um, and I know that since we finished our sort of intense coaching program, things have been pretty easy,
Yeah,
you know?
definitely.
And even when you run bad, it's like, you know, things start to become less and less and less unexpected, you know?
Mhm.
It starts to
Mhm.
become more and more and more things that you know what's going on, and you can accept it. If you get, you know, middle set and you bet and a passive player raises you and you get it in and lose the top set, that's okay, you know?
Mhm.
As long as everything is all part of the plan, that means that our plan is good.
Mhm.
When something goes not according to plan, that's when we need to take a note and adjust. Which is what we're saying about these, passive, bad aggressive players and bad passive players. Our plan is that they're bad passive. When somebody shows up, raises and they've got the nuts, and that's expected. We know that. When they raise and they don't have the nuts and they got something random, the plan that wasn't part of the plan. So now with that guy, we have a new plan. you know? And
Mhm.
the higher up in stakes we go, the more specifically we have to tailor our plan to the people we're playing against. But at this limit right here, where we're at for the next few weeks, we're going to have some really easy to follow plans, some really simple plans, and we're going to find that they're actually going to make us a kind of an absurd amount of money in real world terms. That like memorizing like a few really simple things is enough to like beat just about any job.
Yeah. And I don't want to like brag or anything. Okay, maybe I do.
You're allowed to.
But okay, I'm pretty much I think by after the next video, I'll have enough in my BR for 50 cents dollars. So,
Which
yeah.
is pretty awesome because that would mean that from when I left her, she's since doubled her bankroll. Um, the last time that we actually were in Vegas together. So let's see. Let's wish her some good luck over the next week. And for deucescrack.com, this has been Kristy Arnett and Andrew BalugaWhale Seidman saying good luck, goodbye. See you guys in a week.
All right. Bye, guys.